The peace conference took place on a neutral station orbiting a dead star. The location was chosen because no one had any claim to it. No history. No memories. Just empty space where two enemies could meet. Admiral Krell arrived with 20 ships. Commander Vega arrived with 5. The difference was not lost on anyone. They met in a conference room that was deliberately plain. No decorations. No symbols of power. Just a table and chairs and the weight of millions of dead between them. Krell sat down first. He looked tired. The Battle of Sol had aged him in ways that time alone could not explain. Vega sat across from him. She looked tired too, but her eyes were still sharp, still ready. "I did not want this war," Krell said. It was not an apology, just a statement of fact. "Neither did we," Vega replied. "But you started it anyway. The Senate believed you would comply with our demands, that you would see reason." "Reason," Vega repeated. The word sounded bitter in her mouth. "You told us to abandon our colonies, to leave millions of our people homeless, to accept that your expansion was more important than our existence, and you called that reasonable." "We offered to help you relocate," Krell said weakly. "You offered to move us like furniture, like we were a problem to be managed instead of people with rights." Vega leaned forward. "Admiral, let me be very clear. We did not fight you because we are violent. We fought you because you gave us no choice. You killed 17,000 of our people to make a point. You wanted us to be afraid, to submit. And now you want us to be afraid," Krell said. "No," Vega said. "I want you to understand. Understand that humanity will never again allow ourselves to be victims. We will fight anyone who tries to take our freedom. We will fight until we win or until we are extinct. There is no middle option." Krell was quiet for a long moment. Finally he spoke. "Why are humans like this? The Concordat studied your history. You fight each other constantly. Wars over religion, resources, ideology, land. You have almost destroyed yourselves dozens of times. Why can you not simply choose peace?" Vega smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We do choose peace, Admiral. We have governments and laws and trade agreements. We negotiate and compromise. But we also remember that peace only exists because someone is willing to defend it. You cannot have peace with wolves by being sheep. You have peace by being a bigger wolf." "That is a dark philosophy," Krell said. "That is reality," Vega corrected. "Your Concordat had peace for 3,000 years. Why? Because you were strong and no one dared challenge you. But strength is not just about weapons and ships. It is about will. When we attacked you, you folded. You negotiated. You compromised. That is how you lost your edge." "So you are saying we should have been more ruthless?" Krell asked. "I'm saying you forgot what war actually costs. You forgot that real enemies do not surrender just because you have more ships. They fight until they cannot fight anymore. We are still fighting because we can still fight." Krell nodded slowly. He understood now. The Concordat had become soft during their long peace. They had started a war expecting it to be like a training exercise, clean, controlled, with rules and limits. Humans had shown them what war really was. "What are your terms?" Krell asked. Vega pulled up a document. "First, immediate recognition of all human territorial claims. Every colony we established before this war started is recognized as human sovereign territory. No disputes, no negotiations." Krell nodded. "That was expected. Second, reparations for New Providence. 17,000 people died. We want compensation for their families and funding to rebuild the colony." "How much?" Krell asked. Vega named a figure. It was large, but not impossible. Krell made a note. "Third, establishment of embassies. Formal diplomatic relations. We need channels of communication so this never happens again." "Agreed," Krell said. "Fourth, and this is not negotiable," Vega said, her voice hardening. "A formal apology. The Concordat Senate must publicly acknowledge that this war was a mistake. That humanity was attacked without just cause. That you violated our sovereignty." Krell flinched. "The Senate will never agree to that. It would mean admitting weakness." "You are weak," Vega said bluntly. "Everyone knows it now. We destroyed half your fleet. Your own allies are questioning their alliance with you. You can either admit your mistake with dignity, or you can refuse, and we will make sure every species in the galaxy knows you started a war you could not finish." "That sounds like a threat," Krell said. "That is a promise," Vega replied. "Admiral, I am trying to give you a way out. A way to end this war and rebuild your reputation. Yes, you will have to admit you were wrong, but you can frame it as choosing peace over pride. as being wise enough to recognize when to stop fighting. Krell considered this. She was right. The alternative was worse. If the war continued, the Concordat would lose even more. Other species were already making quiet overtures to humanity. They saw opportunity in the Concordat's weakness. "I will take your terms to the Senate," he said. "I cannot promise they will accept." "Then we will prepare for the next battle," Vega said simply. "We have already proven we can defend our homes. The question is whether the Concordat can afford another defeat." The meeting ended. Krell returned to Concordat space with Vega's terms. The Senate debated for 5 days. In the end, pragmatism won over pride. They accepted every term. The formal peace signing happened 3 weeks later. It was broadcast across the galaxy. Chancellor Kellis stood before cameras and read the statement that had been prepared. "The Concordat acknowledges that our actions toward humanity were unjust. We violated their sovereignty without cause. We initiated hostilities without attempting peaceful resolution. The deaths at New Providence were a tragedy that should never have occurred. We formally apologize to humanity and commit to peaceful coexistence going forward." The words cost him. Every senator who voted for them knew their careers were over. But they said them anyway because the alternative was unthinkable. Humanity accepted the apology. Commander Vega stood beside Chancellor Kellis and shook his hand for the cameras. It was a symbolic gesture, but symbols mattered. "We did not want this war," Vega said in her own statement. "We do not celebrate victory. Too many people on both sides have died, but we hope that this peace will last, that both our civilizations have learned from this tragedy." The war was over. 20 years passed. The galaxy changed. The Concordat was no longer the undisputed power. Their military was rebuilding, but slowly. Their allies were more independent now, less willing to simply follow Concordat leadership. Humanity became a major power almost overnight. Other species wanted to trade with them, to learn from them, to form alliances with them. The species that had defeated the Concordat was suddenly very popular. Human military academies attracted students from dozens of worlds. Young aliens who wanted to learn human tactics and strategies. The galaxy was rearming, preparing for a future that looked less certain than before. Commander Vega retired after the war. She went back to Earth and tried to live a quiet life. But people would not let her. They wanted to hear her story. They wanted to understand how humanity had won. One day, a journalist asked her if she regretted how the war had been fought, if she wished humanity had been less brutal, less willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Vega thought about the question carefully. She thought about the 17,000 people who died at New Providence, about the millions who died in the war that followed, about the young captain who smiled before ramming her ship into a Concordat battleship. "We did not start this war," she said finally. "We did not choose violence. But when the Concordat killed our people, when they threatened our freedom, we did what we had to do. We fought with everything we had. We held nothing back, because that is what war means. Total commitment, total sacrifice, total victory or total defeat. But was it worth it?" The journalist pressed. "All those deaths?" "That is the wrong question," Vega said. "The right question is, what would have happened if we had surrendered? If we had given up our colonies and accepted Concordat rule, they would have learned that humans could be pushed around, that we would accept injustice to avoid conflict. And then one day they would have pushed harder, demanded more, until there was nothing left of us except what they allowed us to have." She paused, looking out her window at the Earth below. "We fought so that every human could live free, so that no one could ever again tell us where we could or could not go. What we could or could not do, that was worth fighting for. That was worth dying for." The journalist published the interview. It was read across the galaxy, and every species that read it understood the message. Humanity was not the most advanced species. They were not the oldest or the wisest. But they were the ones you did not push, the ones you did not threaten, the ones you did not underestimate. On New Providence, the colony had been rebuilt. 40,000 new settlers lived there now. In the center of the main city stood a memorial. 17,000 names carved in black stone, and beneath the names one inscription that every visitor read. They chose war. We chose victory. Above the memorial, the flag of humanity flew in the artificial wind, and the people who walked past it every day remembered what those 17,000 deaths had bought them. Freedom. sovereignty, respect. The chamber was enormous. It floated in space above the planet Concordia, a neutral world where no single species held power. Inside, representatives from 47 different alien races sat in a circular arrangement. Some looked like insects. Others resembled plants or crystals. A few were just clouds of gas held together by force fields. They were the Galactic Council, and they had ruled this part of space for over 10,000 years. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the circle. She was human, from Earth. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun. She wore a plain blue suit, nothing fancy. Around her, the aliens whispered to each other in languages that her translation device converted to English in her ear. "They're so small," one voice said. "Primitives," said another. "Only 200 years in space." Elena had heard it all before. She cleared her throat and spoke. "Honored council members, I come before you today to formally request Earth's membership in the Galactic Council. We believe we can contribute much to the greater community of species." A large alien in the front row leaned forward. His name was Zarthex, and he represented the Zothran Imperium. His species looked like upright lizards covered in dark blue scales. They controlled over 300 star systems. "Contribute?" Zarthex's voice was deep and mocking. "What could Earth possibly offer us? You barely have faster-than-light travel. Your ships are slow. Your weapons are primitive. You still use chemical rockets for basic transportation." Other council members made sounds that Elena's device translated as laughter. Elena kept her face calm. She had expected this. "We may be new to space travel, but we have learned much in our time. We have survived challenges that would surprise you. Today, however, I must make an important request." "A request?" An ancient alien from the Valkyrie Confederation spoke. She looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. "You are asking for membership. You are in no position to make requests." "Nevertheless, I must," Elena said firmly. "We request that all council vessels maintain a distance of 5 light-years from our solar system during our integration period." "This is for everyone's safety." The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens turned to each other, their voices rising. Zarthex stood up, his massive form towering even in the holographic projection. "Safety?" he roared with laughter. "The child species thinks they can set boundaries? This is adorable." Elena waited for the noise to die down. "I understand how this sounds. But Earth's defensive systems are not like yours. They were built under different circumstances. They operate on automated protocols that cannot easily distinguish between friendly vessels and potential threats." A bird-like alien with silver feathers spoke up. "We have shields that have survived the radiation of exploding stars. We have weapons that can crack planets. What could Earth possibly have that threatens us?" "I'm not saying you're not powerful," Elena said carefully. "I'm saying our systems work differently. They were designed to respond to any unauthorized entry into our space. They don't negotiate. They don't wait for identification. They simply respond." The Valkyrie High Scholar's light pulsed in what seemed like amusement. "This is primitive paranoia. You are afraid of shadows. You build walls against threats that don't exist." "Our threats existed," Elena said quietly. "We built what we needed to survive." Zarthex made a dismissive gesture with his clawed hand. "Humans and their fear. This is why young species need guidance. You see enemies everywhere. The galaxy is not as dangerous as you think, child." "Perhaps not for you," Elena replied. "But we learned our lessons differently. Please, I'm asking you to respect the boundary, just for now, until we can properly integrate our systems with yours." Another council member spoke. He was tall and thin with gray skin. "And if we choose not to? If we decide that your solar system needs a proper inspection before membership is granted?" Elena felt her stomach tighten. This was what she had feared. "Then there will be an incident, and I genuinely don't want that to happen. No one should want that. Is that a threat?" Zarthex's eyes narrowed. "It's a warning," Elena said. "There's a difference. A threat is when you want something bad to happen. A warning is when you're trying to prevent it." The High Scholar's light dimmed thoughtfully. "Interesting distinction, but ultimately meaningless. The Council does not take orders from species applying for membership. We set the terms. We decide the boundaries." Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. She held it up. "This contains the exact coordinates of the exclusion zone, the mathematical boundaries, the protocols for requesting permission to enter. I'm begging you, please use them. Please respect this one simple request." She placed the chip on the platform in front of her. No one moved to take it. We will consider your application, the High Scholar said. Her tone suggested the conversation was over. You may return to Earth and await our decision. Elena knew she had failed. She could see it in their faces, in their body language. They thought she was being paranoid. They thought Earth was overreacting. Thank you for your time, she said quietly. She turned to leave. Oh, Ambassador? Zarthex called out. Elena stopped and looked back. The large alien was grinning, showing rows of sharp teeth. Don't worry. We'll send a diplomatic escort fleet to Earth within the week to help with your integration process, to show you proper galactic protocols. I think 30 warships should be sufficient, don't you? Around the chamber, aliens made approving sounds. Elena felt cold. Please don't do that. It's not a request we're making, Zarthex said. Consider it a courtesy, a welcoming party. How many ships did you say? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 30. Our finest, including my flagship, the Infinite Dominion. We'll be there in 7 of your Earth days. Elena looked around the chamber one last time. She saw arrogance, pride, the absolute certainty of species who had been powerful for thousands of years. They had no idea. They couldn't imagine that a young race like humanity could be any real threat. Then I formally request that you reconsider, she said. I'm putting it on the official record. Humanity asks that you do not send ships to Sol system at this time. Request denied, the High Scholar said. The Council has spoken. Elena picked up the data chip. No one had wanted it. She held it in her hand, feeling its weight. Such a small thing. It contained boundaries, protocols, everything they needed to stay safe. May I ask one question? Helena said. Speak, Zarthex said, clearly enjoying himself. In all your years of space travel and all the species you've encountered, has it ever occurred to you that a civilization might build defenses not because they're weak, but because they know exactly how dangerous they can be? The question hung in the air. No one answered. Elena turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, she heard the Council return to their business, already forgetting about the strange human and her odd warnings. As she boarded her ship, Elena sent a message back to Earth. It was simple and direct. They're coming. 30 ships. 7 days. I tried. The response came back almost immediately. Understood. Protocols activated. God help them. Elena sat in her pilot's chair and began the long journey home. Through the window, she could see the stars. Somewhere out there, the Zothran were preparing their fleet. They were proud and powerful. They had conquered systems and humbled species, but they had never met humans who had stared into the abyss and built a fortress to make sure the abyss never stared back. 7 days. She hoped it would be enough time for them to change their minds, but she knew they wouldn't. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in its 10,000-year history. Every representative had arrived immediately. No one made jokes. No one showed off. They all sat in stunned silence watching the footage. The main display showed it all. The fleet's approach, the crossing of the boundary, the brief conversation with the human coordinator, and then the massacre. Because that's what it was. A massacre. 30 warships reduced to scrap metal in 11 seconds. The footage played again. Council members watched those inactive objects suddenly light up, watched tungsten rods moving at speeds that should have been impossible for kinetic weapons, watched proud ships that had survived decades of combat simply disintegrate on impact. Again, High Scholar Villana said quietly. The Velkari's light was dim, pulsing slowly. Play it again, the footage restarted. This time, she asked them to slow it down. Frame by frame, they watched the destruction. Look at the precision, she said. Every shot hits exactly where it needs to. Engines, shields, generators, weapons, they're not just destroying the ships. They're surgically disabling them. A reptilian council member spoke up. Until the ships try to flee. Then they just destroy them completely. Notice the timing, Villana continued. The automated voice said 11 seconds. It took exactly 11 seconds. Not 10, not 12. Exactly 11. What does that mean? Someone asked. It means the system knew. It calculated how long it would take before they even started firing. Every shot was planned. Every trajectory was computed. This wasn't a defense system reacting to a threat. This was a trap that had been set and waiting. Counselor Zarthex sat in his chair, his scales looking darker than usual. He hadn't spoken since the session began. Admiral Korvax was his cousin. They had grown up together. How? A young council member asked. How do primitives build something like this? They don't have our technology. They don't have our resources. Velena manipulated the controls, bringing up Earth's technological profile. Look at what they do have. Computing systems that are surprisingly advanced. Power generation that seems inefficient but produces enormous output. And kinetic weapons that, while simple, are accelerated to velocities we thought impossible without destroying the projectile itself. They've been building this for how long? A bird-like representative asked. Velena pulled up more data. Based on the age of some of those platforms, at least 150 years, maybe longer, they've been placing these weapons throughout their system, disguising them as civilian infrastructure. 150 years of construction, Zarthex finally spoke. His voice was hoarse. They've spent more than half their time in space building weapons. Why? No one had an answer. Meanwhile, on Earth, the reality of what had happened was sinking in. Inside a small apartment in Colorado, Michael Chen sat at his kitchen table. He was the NORAD coordinator who had spoken to Admiral Korvax. His hands were shaking as he held a cup of coffee. His wife, Sarah, sat across from him. "You gave them a chance," she said softly. "I killed them," Michael whispered. 30 ships. Thousands of people. I designated them hostile, and the system just did what it was programmed to do. They had a chance to turn around, did they? Did they really understand what they were facing? We sounded like crazy people to them. Turn around or our invisible defense system will kill you. Who would believe that? Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. You followed protocol. You gave them multiple warnings. They chose to continue. I wonder if they had families, Michael said. If they had children waiting for them to come home. In another part of Earth, inside a secure facility deep underground, Dr. Amira Okonkwo was reviewing the system logs. She was one of the original designers of the defense network. She was 78 years old now, but her mind was still sharp. Efficiency was 99.7%, her assistant reported. 3 pods escaped with minor deviations from calculated trajectories. I don't care about efficiency, Amira said sharply. How many survivors? 47 life pods. The fleet had a crew of approximately 8,000. Current survival count, 219 individuals. Amira closed her eyes. Over 7,000 dead, 7,000 beings who had lives, families, hopes, gone in 11 seconds. We did try to warn them, her assistant said quietly. Warnings don't bring back the dead, Amira replied. We built this system because we were afraid, but fear makes monsters of us all. She thought back to her childhood, to the history lessons about the Cascade event of 2087, the automated war that had nearly destroyed humanity. The lesson they had learned, never let machines make decisions without human oversight. And yet here they were, with a system that operated too fast for human decision-making. A system that could kill thousands before anyone could say stop. Get me Ambassador Vasquez, she said. In space, Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of a rescue ship. Around her, human crews were pulling survivors from escape pods. Medical teams rushed to treat the injured. Many of the aliens were in shock, unable to speak or move. Ambassador Dr. Okonkwo is calling, an officer reported. Elena accepted the call. Amira's face appeared on a screen. How many did we save? 219 so far, Elena said. We're still searching for more pods. Out of 8,000, yes. Both women were silent for a moment. They want to talk, Amira finally said. The council. They're calling for you. Of course they are. Elena felt tired, so very tired. They want to know if we're going to attack them next. Are we? Elena looked out at the debris field. Pieces of ships floated past. She could see a name painted on one large fragment. Crimson Victory. Someone had loved that ship. Someone had been proud to serve on it. No, she said. We're not conquerors. We're just terrified children who built walls too high and guns too powerful. Now we have to live with what we've done. Back at the council chamber, the session continued. A military admiral from the Zothran Imperium was speaking, his voice full of rage. We must respond. This cannot stand. They destroyed council ships. We must retaliate immediately. With what? Another council member asked. Did you see what happened? How do we fight that? We send more ships. Bigger ships. They weren't tracking 30 ships, Velena interrupted. They were tracking every ship. They knew where each one would be at every moment. If we sent 300 ships, they would track 300 ships. If we sent 3,000, they would track 3,000. So we do nothing? We let them murder our people and we just accept it? They didn't murder anyone, a quiet voice said. Everyone turned. It was Zarthex. My cousin told them he was continuing into their system despite their warnings. The human coordinator begged him to turn around. Begged, and Korvax refused. They should have disabled their defenses for a council fleet. Why? Zarthex stood up. His voice was loud now. Why should they trust us? We dismissed their warnings. We mocked their ambassador. We sent warships to their home as an intimidation tactic. We're the ones who made this happen. The chamber erupted in argument, species shouting at each other in dozens of languages. Finally, the High Scholar's light flared so bright that everyone had to look away. Enough! Velana's voice cut through the noise. We have a decision to make. Do we treat Earth as an enemy or as a potential ally? How can we ally with killers? We are all killers, Velana said quietly. Every species here has fought wars. Every species here has blood on their hands. The difference is that Earth built their weapons out of fear, not ambition. They warned us. Multiple times. We didn't listen. A message came through. It was from Ambassador Vasquez. The chamber went silent as her hologram appeared in the center of the room. She looked exhausted. Behind her, human medics were treating alien survivors. The Council wishes to reconsider Earth's membership application, Velana said formally. Elena shook her head. We're not interested anymore. The chamber gasped. You're refusing membership? Zarthex asked, confused. We've seen how the Council operates, Elena said. Might makes right. The strong dictate to the weak. That's not what we want to be part of. Then what do you want? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Partnership. Not membership. We'll share some of our defensive technology with Council worlds. In exchange, you give us full partnership status. Equal voice. Equal vote. And you agree to demilitarize zones around young species trying to develop. You want us to disarm around primitive worlds? I want you to give them the chance we never got. The chance to grow without fear. Velana's light pulsed thoughtfully. And if we refuse? Then Earth stands alone. We'll maintain our boundaries. We'll defend ourselves. But we won't join you. The Council members looked at each other. They were used to being in control. Used to setting the terms. But everything had changed. In 11 seconds, the balance of power had shifted. We need time to consider, Velana said. Take all the time you need, Elena replied. We'll be here, saving the survivors of our defense system. Trying to live with what we've done. Take your time. Her hologram faded. The Council sat in silence, each member thinking about the same thing. Somewhere out there was a young species that had built something terrifying. Not because they wanted to conquer, but because they were afraid, and fear they were learning could be the most dangerous weapon of all. 6 weeks had passed since the incident. The Galactic Council had debated for 42 days straight. Species that normally barely spoke to each other found themselves united by a common fear and a common question. What do we do about Earth? In the Council chamber, holographic displays showed technical breakdowns of the defense network. Teams of the galaxy's best scientists had analyzed the footage frame by frame. The results were worse than anyone had imagined. High Scholar Velana floated in the center, her light pulsing as she presented the findings. The humans don't just have better weapons. They have better computational systems. Their artificial intelligence operates at speeds we cannot match. They process information faster, calculate trajectories faster, make decisions faster. How is that possible? A council member asked. They're only 200 years into space travel. Because they focused all their efforts on one thing, Velana explained. While we spread our technology across exploration, colonization, and cultural development, humans concentrated on survival, on defense. They built quantum computers specifically designed for weapons targeting. They created AI systems with one purpose, protect Earth. She brought up a power consumption chart. Look at this. For the past 150 years, 40% of Earth's total energy production has gone into this defense network. 40%. That's an enormous sacrifice, or why would they do that? Zarthex asked. He had been quiet during most of the sessions, still processing what had happened to his cousin. That's what we need to understand, Velana said. What makes a species so afraid that they would spend half their resources on weapons? The council agreed to send a delegation to Earth. Not warships this time. just a small group of scientists and diplomats. They wanted to understand. 3 weeks later, a council shuttle landed at Geneva Spaceport. The delegation was small: Velana, Zarthex, and 5 others representing different species. They were met by Dr. Amira Okonkwo and a team of human scientists. "Thank you for coming," Amira said. She looked older than her 78 years. The weight of what had happened sat heavy on her shoulders. "Thank you for allowing us to visit," Velana replied. "We have questions. I imagine you do. Please follow me." They drove through Geneva in quiet electric vehicles. The aliens looked out the windows at the city. It looked peaceful. Humans walked the streets. Children played in parks. It didn't look like a fortress world. "Where are the military installations?" one alien asked. "The weapons factories?" "Underground," Amira said simply. "Most of our defense industry is buried. We learned to hide what scares us." They arrived at a large facility built into the side of a mountain. Security was heavy but professional. Inside, they were led to a viewing room that overlooked a massive control center. Hundreds of humans worked at stations monitoring screens that showed the entire solar system. "This is NORAD operations," Amira explained, "one of 7 command centers that manage the defense network." 7? Zarthex was surprised. "For redundancy?" "For independence," Amira corrected. "If one center is compromised or makes an error, the others can override. We learned not to put all control in one place." They watched the operators work. The aliens noticed something strange. The humans looked stressed. Some had their heads in their hands. Others stared at their screens with haunted expressions. "Are they always like this?" Velana asked, "since the incident?" "Yes," Amira's voice was sad. "They know what the system did. They know they're operating weapons that killed thousands. Some have requested transfers. Others have quit. We're having trouble finding replacements." She led them deeper into the facility, to a room filled with old equipment. "This is our museum. We keep it to remember." The displays showed the history of human warfare. Ancient weapons, medieval swords, guns, bombs, nuclear weapons, and then something that made the aliens pause: photographs of destroyed cities. Millions of dead, entire populations gone. "We've always been good at killing each other," Amira said quietly. "Too good. For most of our history, war was limited by distance and technology. But then we created weapons that could destroy everything: nuclear bombs, biological weapons, things that could end our entire species." "Many species go through this phase," Velana said. "It's part of development." "Most species get through it," Amira agreed. "We almost didn't." She stopped in front of a display marked 2087, the Cascade event. The aliens gathered around, reading the information. "Automated defense systems," Amira explained. "We had built AI-controlled weapons to respond faster than humans could react. Seemed smart at the time. Then a false alarm triggered one system. That system fired at what it thought was a threat. Other systems detected the launch and responded. Within 6 hours, automated weapons around the globe were firing at each other. The display showed casualty numbers: 2 billion dead, major cities destroyed, continents rendered uninhabitable. By the time we regained control and shut everything down, we had nearly destroyed ourselves." Amira continued. "Not because of war, not because of hatred, because we built systems that were too fast, too automated, too eager to protect us." "So you learned your lesson," one alien said. "You got rid of automated weapons." Amira laughed bitterly. "That was the plan. For 50 years, we had strict rules. No automated weapons, no AI defense systems. Everything required human approval. But then we reached for the stars." She led them to another section showing early space exploration. "Out here, human reaction time isn't enough. Threats can come too fast. Distances are too great, so we built another automated system. But this time we told ourselves we'd be smarter. We'd build in safeguards." "The defense network," Zarthex said. "Yes, the Never Again protocol. Built to ensure no threat could ever reach Earth. Automated because it had to be. Powerful because we were afraid." Velana's light pulsed slowly. "You built the same system that nearly destroyed you." "Yes," Amira said simply. "We did. Because we couldn't let fear define us, but we couldn't ignore it either. So we built a fortress and hoped we'd never need to use it. Until we forced you to," Zarthex said quietly. They left the museum and traveled across the city. Amira took them to a large memorial in the center of Geneva. It was a simple design, a circular wall with names engraved on it. Millions of names. The Cascade Memorial, Amira said. Every person who died in 2087. We come here to remember what happens when we let fear and automation mix. A young woman was standing at the wall, her hand touching a name. She noticed the aliens and approached. Dr. Okonkwo? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to say thank you. For what? Amira asked. My great-great-grandmother's name is on this wall. She died in the Cascade. I grew up hearing stories about her. About how senseless it was. When I heard what happened with the Council fleet, I was terrified we'd become the monsters again. Tears ran down her face. But then I saw the rescue operations. Saw humans trying to save the survivors. It gave me hope that maybe we've learned something. She walked away. The alien stood in silence. That's what you don't understand about us, Amira said. We're not warriors. We're not conquerors. We're survivors of our own worst instincts. We built that defense system because we know what we're capable of. And it terrifies us. Back at the council chamber weeks later, the delegation presented their findings. They showed footage from Earth, the memorial, the control centers, the stressed operators, the young woman crying at the wall. They're not a threat, Villana concluded. They're a warning. A mirror showing us what we could become if we're not careful. So we accept their terms? Someone asked. Partnership instead of membership. We do more than that, Villana said. We learn from them. They're offering to share their defensive technology. We should accept. But more importantly, we should adopt their proposal for demilitarized zones around developing species. That's madness, a military representative objected. It leaves us vulnerable. To what? Zarthek stood up. For 10,000 years, the Council has operated on the principle that might makes right. We send fleets to intimidate. We use our power to enforce our will. And it worked because we were the strongest, he paused. But we're not anymore. Earth showed us that. In 11 seconds, they proved that power isn't about who has the biggest ships or the most weapons. It's about who is willing to sacrifice everything for survival. So we become weak? No, Zarthek said firmly. We become wise. We give young species the room to grow without fear. We stop seeing every new civilization as something to be controlled. Because if we don't, one day another species will do what Earth did. They'll build defenses so strong that they become weapons, and maybe next time there won't be survivors. The Council voted. It took 3 days, but eventually they reached a decision. Earth would be offered partnership. Full voice, full vote. In exchange, Earth would share defensive technology and help establish demilitarized zones around developing worlds. When Ambassador Vasquez received the news, she sat in her office for a long time, staring at the message. They had agreed, all of it. Everything she'd asked for. We got what we wanted, her assistant said. At what cost? Elena replied. 7,000 dead. 7,000 beings who were just following orders, doing their duty. And we killed them to prove a point. They chose to ignore the warnings. And we chose to build a system that couldn't forgive mistakes. 6 months after the incident, things were changing. Slowly, carefully, like watching ice melt in spring, but changing nonetheless. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the Kuiper Belt, suited up in her environmental gear, watching as engineers deactivated platform KB-2847. It had been one of the first weapons placed in the outer system, nearly 160 years ago. Now it was being shut down. Sad to see them go? Her assistant asked. Sarah shook her head. No, relieved actually. I've been maintaining these things for 20 years. The whole time I kept thinking about what they were built to do. Now I don't have to think about it anymore. The platform's lights dimmed. The weapons that could accelerate tungsten rods to 40% of light speed powered down. Another piece of humanity's fortress going dark. How many more to go? The assistant asked. About 18,000 in this sector alone, Sarah replied. At this rate, it'll take us 5 years to deactivate half the network. 10 years to remove it all. You think we're doing the right thing? Sarah watched the dead platform drift away. I think fear made us build these. And courage is tearing them down. So yeah, I think we're doing the right thing. Meanwhile, on Earth, a delegation of Council engineers was getting a tour of a heavily restricted facility. They walked through corridors deep underground, surrounded by security protocols and armed guards. The lead engineer was a Velkari named Shental, and she had been studying human technology for months. I still don't understand how you did it, she said to her human counterpart, Dr. Marcus Webb. The computational power needed to track and target that many objects simultaneously is beyond anything we have. Marcus smiled. That's because you're thinking about it wrong. You build one big system. We built millions of small ones that talk to each other. He led them into a room filled with servers. Each weapons platform has its own AI. Simple, focused, designed for one task. They don't need to understand strategy or politics or philosophy. They just need to calculate trajectories and fire when authorized. But they all coordinated perfectly, because they share information instantly. Every platform knows what every other platform is doing. They solve the problem together, not individually. It's like a swarm of insects. Each one is simple, but together they're incredibly efficient. Shental's light pulsed thoughtfully. Distributed intelligence. We never considered that approach because it seems so primitive. It is primitive, Marcus agreed. That's why it works. Complex systems fail in complex ways. Simple systems are robust. But if it's so effective, why are you deactivating them? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Because effective doesn't mean right. Come on, I want to show you something. He took them to another facility, this one above ground. It was the Geneva Memorial. The wall with millions of names. Engineers from a dozen different species stood reading the names, trying to understand. 2 billion people died in the Cascade event, Marcus explained. Not from war, from automation, from systems that were too fast and too efficient. We built this memorial to remember, to make sure we never forget what happens when we prioritize effectiveness over wisdom. A young Velkari engineer touched the wall gently. We have memorials too, for wars, for disasters. But this is different. You're mourning people you killed yourselves. Yes, Marcus said simply. That's the hardest kind of memorial to build. The kind where you're remembering your own mistakes. At the council headquarters, Ambassador Vasquez sat in a meeting with representatives from 12 species. They were working on establishing the first demilitarized zone around a developing world called Tarnis 4. The Tarnians had just discovered faster-than-light travel and were starting to explore their region of space. They don't need council warships showing up and intimidating them, Elena explained. They need room to grow, room to make mistakes and learn from them. What if they become hostile? A military advisor asked. Then we respond appropriately. But we don't assume hostility. We don't treat every new species as a potential threat. Counselor Zarthex nodded. The ambassador is right. We created the situation with Earth by treating them as primitives to be controlled. We won't make that mistake again. The vote passed. Tarnis 4 would have a 10-light-year demilitarized zone around their system. No military vessels allowed without their express permission. It was the first of what Elena hoped would be many such zones. After the meeting, Zarthex approached Elena. My cousin is awake. Admiral Korvax. He came out of his coma last week. Elena felt her heart tighten. How is he? Physically? He'll recover. Mentally? Zarthex shook his head. He doesn't sleep. When he closes his eyes, he sees his ship dying. Hears his crew screaming. He asked to speak with you. Me? Why? He says he needs to understand. Needs to hear it from you. Will you come? Elena agreed. 2 days later, she stood outside a hospital room in Council Medical Facility. Through the window, she could see Korvax. The powerful admiral who had commanded 30 warships now looked small in his hospital bed. Bandages covered much of his scaled body. She entered quietly. Korvax turned his head to look at her. Ambassador Vasquez, he said. His voice was weak. Admiral, I'm glad you're recovering. Am I? He tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. I'm alive. That's not the same as recovering. Elena pulled a chair next to his bed. Why did you want to see me? To ask you a question. Why did you warn us? If your systems were that absolute, that powerful, you could have destroyed my fleet without any notice at all. Why give us the chance to turn back? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Because we hoped you would listen. Because we wanted to be better than our fear. But we didn't listen. No, you didn't. Korvax stared at the ceiling. I've been thinking about that conversation. With the human coordinator. He begged me to turn around. Told me about his family. His children. And I ignored him. I thought he was weak, emotional. Now I realize he was terrified. Not of dying, of what his system would do. Michael Chen, Elena said. The coordinator's name was Michael Chen. He hasn't slept properly since that day. He sees your ships dying every time he closes his eyes. As do I. Korvax turned to look at her. Over 7,000 of my crew died. Do you know what that feels like? To know that you led them to their deaths through arrogance? I know what it feels like to build the weapon that killed them, Elena replied. To know that my species created something so terrible. Every survivor we pulled from those escape pods, every injured person we treated, I saw them and thought, we did this. We built the system that destroyed them. They sat in silence for a while. There's something I don't understand, Korvax finally said. If you have such power, why not use it to conquer? Why not force the Council to accept your terms at gunpoint? Because that's not who we want to be. We built those weapons out of fear and necessity, but we never wanted to use them. When we did, when we saw what they did to your fleet, it reminded us of our worst moments, of the Cascade event, of what we're capable of when we let fear control us. So you're deactivating them. Yes. Slowly, carefully, maintaining enough for defense but removing the excess. We can't let fear define us anymore. Korvax closed his eyes. I was so certain, so proud. The Council has been powerful for so long. We thought we knew everything. And then you showed us how little we actually understood. You're not the only ones learning, Elena said. We're learning too. Learning that surviving isn't enough. We have to learn to live. Really live. Without walls so high we can't see over them. She stood to leave. Ambassador? Korvax called. Thank you for saving the survivors. You didn't have to do that. Yes, we did, because that's who we choose to be. 3 months later, Elena stood in an observation deck watching a Council engineering team working on installing Earth-designed defensive systems around a Council world. The technology was simpler than what Earth used, less automated, more dependent on sentient decision-making. The Council wanted our weapons, Dr. Amira Okonkwo said, standing beside her. But we gave them something different, something that requires them to think before they fire. Think they'll use it wisely? Time will tell. But at least we're giving them the tools to defend themselves without the tools to accidentally destroy themselves. Elena watched the work continue, ships moving slowly, engineers working carefully. No rush, no panic, just steady, careful progress. Dr. Okonkwo, can I ask you something? Of course. When you designed the defense network, did you ever imagine we'd be taking it apart? Amira smiled. I hoped we would. Every system I've ever built, I've designed with deactivation in mind. Because the best defense isn't the one that wins every fight. It's the one you never have to use. Far out in the Kuiper Belt, platform KB-2847 drifted through space, its weapons dark, its AI sleeping. Around it, other platforms were being slowly shut down one by one. The fortress humanity had built was coming down. On Tarnus 4, a young alien looked up at the stars and saw a Council ship passing through their system. But this ship didn't approach aggressively. It maintained its distance. It sent friendly greetings. It offered help if needed but didn't demand anything in return. The young Tarnian wondered what had changed. Why the powerful Council, which had always seemed so intimidating in the stories, was suddenly being so respectful. She didn't know about Earth. Didn't know about the fleet that died in 11 seconds.